In my last video, I built a table with a scaled down version of the 5-acre pond. This included 3D printing all the structure, adding in green LEDs that turn off and on automatically, as well as building a glass enclosure for an awesome fish mount. And since I now have that model handy, I decided to see just how small of a replica I could make. And there may have been a few problems along the way. To get this project started, we must first mill through this rough lumber into something that can be used. I decided for this project to use the red oak that was milled from the big oak tree that fell on the Crimson Oak farm during the last major hurricane. The process of prepping wood is starting to feel pretty repetitive, so let's speed through these first couple of steps of getting the wood milled to the correct length and width. I decided for this project to use the planer to get both parallel and flat faces. You can really see in this clip just how warped this board was. I did this by laying the wood on the planer sled, adding in wedges to prevent any movement, and then playing that side flat. This is a pretty cool technique if you don't have a joiner or if you're trying to flatten a board wider than your joiner can go, which is what's going on in my case. After you plane the first face, you can then remove the wood from the sled and use the planer like normal to get the piece down to your desired thickness. Now that we have the red oak milled down, let's talk about exactly what we're going to do with this model. Basically, my idea is to shrink the lake down to fit within the coasters I'm already making. Here is a really good size comparison of just how much smaller these are versus the previous table I just built. Since these are so small and a lot faster to make, I decided to test out the pattern feature within Fusion 360. This allows you to program the CNC to a set of geometry instead of copying and pasting and then going in and changing all of the references. With this pattern feature, you basically tell the machine, hey, do exactly what you just did, but in a different spot. The actual CNC here is pretty simple and exactly the same as the table, just with smaller diameter tools. I first run a roughing adaptive with an 1/8 inch end mill, and then a finishing adaptive with a 16 inch end mill. And then finally, I contour to cut out the coasters. Now I like mounting my wood stock using masking tape and super glue. I've had really good results using this method and it's very simple. I know it's not the best or the most professional method, but it has always worked for my needs. With the red oak fixed to the bed, let's start the CNC process. This should be simple, right? Just sit back and watch the machine work? Easy jobs. Well, I guess I was wrong. My stock in the real world ended up being thinner than what I anticipated it being, and yeah, it cut right through it. Quick fix on the computer, and let's try again. You can see the results right off the CNC are pretty impressive, but I did do some extra cleaning using a razor blade and a sanding block before pouring the resin. To prep for the resin, I applied blue masking tape around the lake. I'm not sure why I thought I needed to do this because I think in the end it didn't provide any value, but my intent was to prevent the epoxy from leaving the top surface. Once prepped, I mixed up some epoxy. This is a faster cure epoxy, and I put down a sealing layer first before I do the deep pour. You want to do this because it helps prevent the wood from drawing in air, which will leave bubbles in the resin. I typically let the sealing layer cure for 2 to 3 hours before the deep pour. There were a lot of comments in my last video why I didn't color the resin, and I have no good reason other than I was scared to mess up the table. So since we're prototyping 3D coasters, let's try a green tint and a blue tint. One last thing I thought would be cool to show is how do I figure out the rough amount of resin I will need, especially for harder shapes like the lake. In Fusion 360, there is a feature to create a body from a watertight void called boundary fill. So I encapsulate the lake and then perform this feature. I now have a body of basically the resin, and then I can go into properties and find volume. These coasters came out to needing about 21 milliliters of resin. The sponsor for this video is Creality. I've been using the Creality Ender 3 3D printer for the last 4 years or so. So when they reached out to me about testing their newest Falcon 2 22-watt laser engraver, I knew I had to give it a try. Out of the box, this machine I would say is 95% assembled, which makes assembly much faster. And the bulk of assembly is literally plugging in cables. This machine comes with everything that is needed to get up and running, but some extras I recommend adding would be the larger honeycomb bed and some type of enclosure if you intend to do any of this work inside. I just have mine set up temporarily right now, but I'm venting all the fumes out my back window. I have been making a lot of coasters lately, so logically it makes sense to be the first thing that I engrave. This machine comes with an aluminum gauge to set the correct height for the laser head over your workpiece. This ensures the best focal point for either engraving or cutting. I am using Lightburn to control the laser. This is a very common software package for controlling engravers, but the major thing to note is that this laser has an integrated air assist, which is a huge plus. This can be toggled on or off depending on whether you are engraving or cutting in the Cuts tab. Now let's test out a few coasters and get these settings dialed in before engraving the Topo Map coasters. Since I don't have a router sled, I decided to just manually jog the CNC. It's a lot faster than setting up a facing toolpath in Fusion 360. After the facing operation, I lightly hit it with 120 grit sandpaper, and man, these things are looking nice. Now that I got the settings dialed in for red oak, let's burn the Crimson Oak logo into place. If you're interested in checking out this laser, I will provide a link in the description below. And just like that, 2 logos burnt in. I was having quite the trouble sanding the coasters at first, but then I remembered the masking tape and superglue trick. This was a game changer and made all of the sanding and polishing a breeze, especially in this nice fall weather we've been receiving lately. Now that these coasters have some finish applied to them, you can see side by side that they are the same size as the ones I sell at natemakes.shop. I must say that with these being the first lake maps that I've made this small, they turned out a lot better than expected. But with all projects, I'm already thinking of even better ways to make these or extra features to add. Like, could I add the LEDs like I did in the big table? If you thought this was a cool project, please press that subscribe button as it really helps this channel out. I have some very cool and complicated projects that I'm currently designing, and you're definitely not going to want to miss them. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.